Location, an isolated cottage in the English countryside. There's a kind of silence that doesn't comfort, it closes in. The kind that wraps around the walls and presses its fingers against the windows. That's the silence that greeted the cottage every evening, long after the birds had stopped singing and the trees had gone still. It wasn't quiet, it was watchful. The cottage was old, tucked between two hills and buried behind tangled brambles and thick, dripping ivy. It was the kind of place meant to be forgotten, left behind by time. No nearby roads, no neighbors, just wind, trees, and a single dirt path that vanished behind the trees like it didn't want to be followed. She came to escape, burn out, break down, divorce, too many labels and too many sleepless nights. She wanted quiet, and quiet is what she got. But almost immediately, the house began to breathe in ways it shouldn't. The window was the first thing that felt wrong, tall, narrow, slightly warped by age. It faced the woods behind the house, where no path led and the trees were too thick to see through. The glass never looked quite clean, no matter how much it was scrubbed. In daylight, it reflected the forest like a mirror submerged underwater. But at night, it behaved differently. Each evening, the routine repeated itself like a prayer, a cup of tea, a stack of red pens and papers, the sound of the kettle, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of wind between the bricks, and always the faint pressure, soft at first, but undeniable, the weight of being observed, as though someone were standing just behind the glass, still as a statue staring in. But every time the curtain was pulled aside, the window showed only the woods, the still, breathless woods. No birdsong, no wind, no movement at all. For a while, it was easier to pretend, easier to blame fatigue, isolation, the weight of past trauma that left its fingerprints on everything. The mind can conjure monsters when it's left alone too long. That's what she told herself, even when she began to feel the window watching her during the day. The reflection was wrong, not dramatically, subtly. Like a lie told with a straight face. One evening, as she reached for her tea, she noticed the hand in the reflection didn't move. Her own arm lifted, but in the window, it lagged, delayed. Then, instead of following her motion, the hand in the reflection stayed suspended, fingers twitching slightly. The next evening, the reflection smiled. A soft, close-lipped smile that stretched a second too long and faded far too slowly. But her own face hadn't moved at all. Her mouth had been closed. Her eyes wide. She stopped looking at the window. She lit more candles, played music, kept the curtains drawn, but the feeling never left. She started hearing things, soft creaks from inside the walls, breaths that didn't belong to her, a dragging sound from the ceiling above. Even though the cottage had no second floor, the shadows began to move independently of the light. The corners of the room seemed to stretch longer at night. She told herself it was stress, isolation, the residue of old grief. She held on to logic like a candle in a storm. But on the seventh night, during a late autumn thunderstorm, everything changed. The rain came hard and fast, slamming the roof like fists. The wind howled across the hills like something living. The fireplace hissed low, struggling to keep the cold at bay. As lightning cracked across the sky, the lamp beside the desk flickered and died. She sat in darkness until the window began to glow. A soft, unnatural light spilled from the glass, not from outside, from within the window itself. Pale, almost blue, like moonlight underwater. Compelled by a force she didn't understand, she approached it. Her breath trembled in her chest. The air in the room felt thick, almost solid. Her footsteps felt distant, like walking through molasses. She stood in front of the window and looked in. The forest was still, completely still. No movement, no rain, no wind. Though she could hear the storm raging outside, the world in the glass was silent, frozen. Unreal. Then something moved behind her reflection. It wasn't her. It had her shape, her hair, her clothes. But the figure stood too straight, the shoulders too stiff. the expression too blank. And then, with agonizing slowness, it blinked. Once, deliberately, the eyes glowed faintly. Something in the glass reached out, not through the window, but inside the reflection itself, touching the edge of her mirrored face with fingers that looked too long. She stumbled backward. The lamp flickered back on. The reflection vanished. Rain resumed tapping the window like 1,000 cold fingers. She collapsed into the chair, chest heaving, ears ringing. All sense of reason dissolved into a black ocean of dread. The next morning, she packed without hesitation. She left the cottage and never returned. The villagers didn't ask questions. But one man, a pastor with clouded eyes and a voice like dust, spoke quietly to her outside the church steps. His words were brief. Chilling. That house was built backwards. The window doesn't reflect this world. It watches the one behind. That night, a new tenant arrived, a photographer seeking inspiration. She lasted 3 days. She was found muttering to herself in the middle of the woods, barefoot and shaking, her eyes glassy, her hands covered in blood and broken glass. They said she tried to claw something out of the inside of the window. No one has lived there since. But sometimes hikers say they've seen movement through the trees, a faint glow behind, cracked glass, and a figure standing perfectly still, staring through a window that shouldn't reflect anything at all, just watching, always watching. Location. Abandoned temple ruins in northern Japan. They warn not to follow the red lantern, not as folklore, not as a bedtime ghost story. The warning came with locked eyes, lowered voices, and trembling hands, like passing a curse through a whisper. The villagers in the small town beneath the forest wouldn't speak its name. They crossed themselves, walked away mid-sentence. No one told stories, only warnings, and they were always the same. If you see the red lantern, turn back. It means the ritual never ended. But warnings are only effective to those who believe. Ryan didn't. He wasn't cruel, just curious. A travel vlogger with 800K subscribers, a drone, and an appetite for haunted places. He thought the legends were exaggerated. A good story with cinematic angles and jump cuts. His channel thrived on cursed woods and abandoned asylums. This would be no different. It took 2 days of hiking through tangled, moss-choked trees to find it. The forest didn't feel right from the beginning. The silence there was unnatural, no birds, no wind, just the thudding of blood in the ears. Trees stood too close together, trunks twisted like bones mid-scream. A strange pressure hovered in the air. His footage would later show brief flickers, like people walking between the trees just at the edge of the frame. But nothing ever appeared in real time. Then he found the path, narrow, crumbling, lined with fallen stones carved with unreadable glyphs. It led to a clearing and the temple. Time had abandoned it. The main structure was crumbling, roof sagging inward. The wood had turned black, not from fire, but from something slower, something that drained. Everything felt frozen in decay, like the place had been holding its breath for 100 years. But what made Ryan stop, what made his camera hand lower, was the lantern. Suspended above the gate by a rotting beam, the red lantern glowed softly. It shouldn't have. There was no electricity, no fuel. It hung in still air, unmoving, untouched by time, burning with a light that flickered not from within, but like something was watching it from the other side. And it was warm. The lantern radiated heat in the freezing air. That should have been the moment to turn back. But he crossed the threshold. The moment his foot passed the stone gate, a pressure shifted. His eardrums popped. The world dimmed, like he'd stepped into a vacuum. He spoke aloud, just a test. But his voice felt flattened, like the air swallowed it. He started filming. Inside, the temple walls were covered in symbols, not painted, scratched in with nails, knives, fingers. Some were deep, bleeding. Crude pictures of bodies bent backward, heads missing, eyes stitched shut. The altar at the center was a pit, circular, rimmed with jagged black stones. Something inside pulsed, not with sound, but with emotion. He couldn't describe it. Only that when he stood near the edge, he felt remembered. That's when the chanting started. No source, no echo, just voices that sounded wet and too close. Low murmurs like people praying with their mouths full of ash. They rose and fell with no rhythm, growing louder with every second. He turned toward the entrance and saw himself standing there. Same jacket, same boots, same camera. But the face was wrong. Where the eyes should have been, there were empty sockets, stitched shut with red thread. The mouth was twisted into a silent scream, lips pinned in place by nails. The doppelganger lifted the camera slowly and pressed record. Ryan dropped his gear and no thought, no plan. Just terror. His vision blurred, the woods swallowed him. Branches sliced his arms, roots grabbed his feet. Something was behind him, mimicking his breath, closer with every step. But when he burst through the tree line hours later, back into the clearing near the road, the chanting stopped. He collapsed near the van, drenched in sweat, covered in scratches, alone, or so he thought. The camera footage left behind in the temple was found by local police after hikers reported strange lights in the woods. The memory card contained only one file, time-stamped 3 hours after Ryan claimed he had escaped. It showed him sitting calmly at the altar, whispering to someone off-screen. She's awake now, she's still hungry. Then the screen went black. 2 weeks later, Ryan's YouTube channel posted a new video, no title, no thumbnail, just a black screen with faint breathing in the background. A single frame, almost unnoticeable, flashed in the middle. It showed the red lantern glowing brightly in his bedroom. No one has seen or heard from him since, but new subscribers keep joining the channel. And sometimes, in the comment sections of the old videos, a new user appears. The profile picture is just the lantern. The bio reads, "The ritual never ended," and the comments are always the same. "I see you. Now you see me. Location me." An old brownstone in Boston old homes breathe. Everyone knows that. The shifting wood, the moaning pipes, the sigh of air through ancient cracks. It's the kind of noise people get used to. Some even find it comforting, like the house is alive, like it's speaking. But this house wasn't speaking. It was listening. Maria was a gifted music student, disciplined, quiet, introverted, the kind of person who doesn't stir shadows. She had rented the top floor of an old brownstone in Boston's South End. High ceilings, crown molding, a fireplace no longer in use. Cheap because the bottom floor was an abandoned funeral home sealed off decades ago. No access, no light, just stairs that ended at a bolted metal door. But she didn't care. All she wanted was space for her cello and silence for her craft. And that in the beginning is what she had. Until the sound began. It wasn't loud, not at first, a faint click. Then a pause. Then a dragging sound, like something with long, deliberate fingers was crawling beneath the wooden floor just below her feet. It would start the moment she placed her bow on the strings, as if it were summoned by music. It followed no schedule. It didn't match the pipes or the settling wood. It moved with intention. Click, click, drag. Click, click, drag. She tried to ignore it. Blamed it on rats, on pipes, on the dying furnace. But the more she played, the more persistent the sound became. The longer she practiced, the louder it grew. Until one night, she stopped mid-phrase and whispered into the floor, "What do you want?" And the sound stopped, just for a moment. Then came 3 soft knocks from underneath. Her breath caught in her throat. She stood frozen, bow trembling in her hand. And then, just above the floorboards, came a sound that didn't belong, a low hum, musical, in tune with her cello's last note, a harmony sung by no mouth she could see. She ran that night, slept at a friend's apartment, but her cello stayed behind, and when she returned the next morning, the bow had moved, not far. Just enough to rest across the strings as if placed with care. The strings had been retuned, not perfectly, but deliberately. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't want to seem crazy. Musicians sometimes imagine things. It's part of the obsession, the sensitivity, the thin line between genius and unraveling. So she stayed, practiced less, locked her door, slept with headphones. But the sound beneath the floor didn't leave. One night, she placed a voice recorder on the wooden boards before bed, just to prove something, to herself, to the silence. She let it run all night. In the morning, she played it back. At first, it was what she expected: ambient noise, creaks, nothing unusual. Then about 4 hours in, breathing, low, rhythmic, measured. Then came the whisper, "You play beautifully, Maria." The recorder dropped from her hand. A scream caught in her chest. She hadn't said her name in the apartment, not out loud. No one had visited. No one knew where she lived. And still, something beneath the floor knew her name. She considered leaving again, but her hands wouldn't pack. Her feet wouldn't move. The fear had settled in her bones like mold in the walls, a slow rot that no sunlight could reach. Something had started paying attention to her, and part of her deep down needed to know why. She began playing again every night, not just to practice, but to speak, to communicate. The cello became her voice, her prayer, her warning. And whatever lived beneath her, it listened. The sound under the floor grew closer, more distinct. Sometimes she swore she could hear fingers tapping along to the rhythm, breathing that aligned with the pulse of her notes. A presence in harmony. She began to notice other changes. Her technique improved, seemingly overnight. Songs she had never learned emerged from her fingertips. Complex melodies that made her weep without knowing why. Her bow moved like it had a will of its own, guided by invisible hands. And every time she stopped, the clicking resumed. Faster, closer, angrier. She stopped leaving the house. She stopped answering calls. The cello consumed her, but not just the music, the ritual. Because it was no longer performance, it was worship. And she wasn't the one being praised. One stormy night, lightning cracked the sky and knocked out the power. Darkness swallowed the room. The only sound was her cello, now vibrating on its own. Low, sustained notes, though no bow moved. She lit a candle with shaking hands. That's when she saw it. A line, thin and jagged, had appeared between the floorboards, and something moved beneath it. Fingers, pale, thin, twitching. They reached up through the crack, brushing the wood with curiosity. They flexed in rhythm with the cello's vibrations. And then, slowly, they began to push upward. She screamed and grabbed her cello, smashing it to the floor. The sound stopped instantly. The fingers withdrew. The next day, police broke into the lower level of the brownstone. The locked funeral home had been untouched for years, or so it was thought. But behind the bolted door was a staircase, rotting and splintered, leading into a sealed soundproof chamber. Inside were dozens of old wax cylinders, recordings, labeled with names, all of the musicians. The police never made the contents public, but one officer, shaken and pale, said he heard something while carrying the evidence to the van. A cello, playing all on its own, from the shattered remains of the funeral table, and over it breathing. Maria was never found. Only her cello remained in the room. Strings torn, body cracked, but still vibrating, even though the bow was missing. Location, an online true crime documentary. The video wasn't supposed to be disturbing. It was just a documentary. 4 parts. A slow burn mystery about a family that disappeared during a winter cabin vacation. No gore, no violence on screen, no jump scares. Just eerie stillness and unanswered questions. The kind that leaves a chill long after the credits fade. The documentary was called The Red Cabin Murders. It premiered quietly on a niche true crime platform. The trailer showed footage recovered from an old camcorder. Clips from the father's recordings on a family trip to the Norwegian woods. Smiling twins. A laughing wife. Snow falling gently on the wooden porch. a happy family, until they weren't. Within days, the series exploded, not because of the quality, but because something was wrong. At first, it was small. Viewers noticed something strange in the footage, particularly in episode 2. A dark shape, a figure standing in the distance, always the same spot, about 20 feet from the cabin. Never closer, never further, just standing. It didn't move, it didn't wave, it didn't enter the house, but it was always there, in the background, in the reflection of a window, in the space between two trees where no shadow should have been. No one mentioned it in the family's recordings, not once. In episode 3, the father begins to deteriorate. He becomes paranoid, speaking into the camera in whispers. Something's wrong. I see things when I look out the window, but nothing's there when I open the door. I think it's the snow playing tricks, or not tricks. Warnings? I'm starting to think the cabin isn't isolated, it's a stage. The mother stops appearing in the footage. The daughters seem sleep deprived, frightened. They begin scribbling strange symbols in the snow. One night, the father films one of them outside, barefoot, staring at the trees, muttering a language no one could recognize. But it was episode 4 that broke people. It opens with a static shot of the living room, all lights off, the camcorder left running on a shelf. The only illumination comes from the fireplace, flickering shadows dancing across the room. And in the center, sitting perfectly still, is the younger daughter, eyes wide, hands folded, staring directly into the lens. She doesn't blink for 6 minutes. What horrified viewers wasn't her stillness, it was her face. Because in every other scene where the mysterious figure appeared, the family members' faces became blurred, smeared like wet paint, as if something in the footage corrupted them. But her face never blurred, not once. Even in the glitchiest scenes, her eyes remained crystal clear, her smile never flickered. People began to theorize. Reddit threads multiplied overnight. Viewers enhanced frames, cross-referenced audio, tracked the GPS metadata in the footage. One user posted something strange. Episode 4 was uploaded before the platform had access to the recovered tapes. Another claimed to have frozen the last frame and found coordinates hidden in the static. A third user tried contacting the production team, but received a cryptic message from a locked account. She doesn't live in the tape. She lives in the act of watching. Then people began experiencing things. Those who watched the full series reported strange disturbances at home. Smart TVs turning on in the middle of the night. Devices auto playing episode 4 even after deletion. One woman claimed her toddler began humming the soundtrack despite never seeing the show. The most terrifying incident came from a live streamer, a skeptic. He titled his reaction, "I'm watching this cursed series so you don't have to." Halfway through episode 4, he stopped speaking. His eyes lost focus. He leaned forward, then whispered, "She's standing behind you." The stream ended abruptly. The video was deleted an hour later. The channel vanished, but the clip was saved and replayed and slowed down. And just before the stream ends, for a single frame, the same girl, the one from the cabin, can be seen reflected in the dark screen behind him, smiling. The aftermath only deepened the mystery. The documentary's production team denied responsibility. They claimed the footage was emailed to them by an anonymous source. No name, no return address, no metadata, just a subject line, "She likes to be seen." When asked for the original hard drive, they confessed something impossible. Never had one. The footage wasn't uploaded by them. It appeared in their cloud folder, unprompted. And here's where the story crosses a threshold, a line that shouldn't be crossed. Several users who attempted to re-edit or remaster the series reported one final horror: the girl's face began to appear in their raw footage. Not the archived tape, not the original show, their own recordings. Birthday parties, vlogs, baby monitors, At first, just in reflections, then closer. One filmmaker burned every drive he owned after she appeared inside a frame he hadn't shot. No one speaks about it now. The series has been pulled, banned, wiped from servers, all copies gone. But every so often, a new channel appears, with no uploads, just a familiar profile picture, a young girl, clear blue eyes, faint smile, and in the bio, a single line, "You watched her. Now she's watching you." Oh, final lines read slowly, as if whispered through a screen. They said watching was safe. They said nothing can hurt you through a screen. They were wrong. Because the moment you looked, she looked back.